Okay, so now the Gemara says on the bottom, today's daf is Moed Katan daf Yud Gimel, and we're on the bottom of your base and the base. The last line, it says, "V'shola pishtanom min hamisha." You're allowed to soak the flax, get it from the. You're allowed to take up the flax from the pot on Chol Moed. But if you intend to do your work on Chol Moed, then we're going to fine you. So Bamine Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera, he says, Kiven Balachta B'Moed Umeis Mao Sheiknisu Banav Achrav. He says, let's say you intended to do your work on Chol Moed and then you died. Are we going to penalize your son after you as a result of this? Im Timtzum, or if you want to say, if you want to say Tsaram Ozen Bechor, if you want to say that if you in a situation where you pierced the ear of the firstborn, then under those circumstances, we know that. What are we talking about here? We're talking about the animal of a Kohen. If a Kohen has an animal, and a Kohen gets a firstborn animal, the Kohen is given a firstborn. That's from the Torah. And it's supposed to be brought as a korban. But if it has a blemish, then the Kohen gets to use it. So there was always a concern that the Kohen might be dishonest and inappropriately make a blemish on the ear of the animal. So let's say the Kohen did it. If the Kohen did what he wasn't supposed to do and he made a blemish so he could use the firstborn animal, then we learned under those circumstances, Kanaso Beno Achrav. There we do penalize the son after the Kohen. That not only can the Kohen who made the pierce not use the animal, but also anybody, even his son who inherited from him, he also cannot use the animal. So maybe just like there, we penalize the next generation. That the fine is on the object, not on the person. So to here by the Malacha Chol Moed. So the Gemara says, maybe that's the reason there. In that case, we say that the fine is on the object and not on the person, because there it's a biblical prohibition. And if you want to say Machar Avdo, so that case is different because that case is a biblical prohibition. So therefore we're stricter. And what about another case where you also penalize the object and not the person? Machar Abdul Kachavim, here where if you sell your Eved to an idolater, you sell your Canaanite servant to an idolater, umeis, and then the person, you're not allowed to do that. It's against the Torah, but let's say you did it, and then the person dies. Kinasu b'no achrav, then you penalize his son after him. Mishum dekol yoma mafkilim mitzvos. There you penalize the son, that the son has to redeem the Canaanite servant. He has to buy him back from the Canaanite who he was sold to. There the reason is because kol yoma mafkilim mitzvos. Every day there he's uprooting this person from mitzvos. Every day there he's uprooting him from his ability to do a mitzvah. But hachamai. But here in this case, what's the law? Gavra kanas rabbanon v'alei. So is the person being penalized? And there in this case, now the person who did the work, the father who did the work, he's no longer there, and so therefore we don't penalize the next generation. Or maybe we penalize the money, and in this case, indeed. Maybe in this case we penalize the money, so therefore we're going to penalize the next generation. So when this question was raised to Rabbi Zera responds to Rabbi Yirmiyah Tinisua. We learned in the Mishnah in Shvius Sadash and Kavatsa b'Shvius. Let's say you have a field that you took the thorns out of the field in the sabbatical year, which you're technically speaking, it's not prohibited. So then tizar motzi shvius. So then you're allowed to sow the field after the sabbatical year. You're allowed to do it. But let's say what you did was you fertilized the field, which you're not allowed to do in the sabbatical year. Then lo tizar motzi shvius. Then you're not allowed to sow the field after the sabbatical year. V'amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina taught Naktina. We learned Hativa umeis beno, that let's say you fertilize the field during the sabbatical year, which you're not allowed to do, and then he dies. Beno Zora, that his son is allowed to sow the field afterwards. Amo adidei kanser rabbanan, lebrei lo kanser rabbanan. We see from here that the son, adidei kanser rabbanan, he himself is penalized, but not his son. Lebrei lo kanser rabbanan. So Amar Abaye said, Naktina, we have a principle. So we've established there in this case also by Chol Moed, L'didei Kanser Rabbanan, L'brelo Kanser Rabbanan. We penalize the person, but not the son, and you would be allowed to do the field. You're allowed to work, use the object of Chol Moed. So Amar Abaye Naktina, we have another principle, Timei Rosav Umeis. So let's say you have a person, who has truma. Truma is sacred food. You can't eat it if it's tamei. But then what happened was somebody else comes along and makes that food tamei. Then we say under those circumstances, you have to pay for it. But let's say the person who did it, who made the food tamei, and normally if you owe a person money, you can get the money from the estate. But in this case, we say if a person, teammate taras of a mace, well, kansu b'no acharav. We don't penalize his son afterwards. Why not? My timer. Hazek shein or nikar loshmei hazek. Because we said since this damage is not recognizable, it's not going to be considered damage. And so therefore we say l'didei kansu rabbanan, l'vrelo kansu rabbanan. Since it's a case where the damage is not recognizable, what's an example of where damage is not recognizable? Like if you make something yayin nesach, you make something prohibited wine by just touching it. So that's called damage that's not recognizable. So there we penalize the person, but we don't penalize the l'didei kansu rabbanan, l'vrelo kansu rabbanan. We penalize the person, but not the rabbis. So now we say the Mishnah says, the Mishnah says we don't purchase houses, servants, or animals on Chol Moed unless it's for the purpose of the festival itself. Or for the person who's selling it, that he doesn't have enough to eat. So the Gemara says, let's say Rav asked Rav Nachman the following question: Schar Pu'ula. Let's say you have a worker, he needs money for his job. He doesn't have what to eat. Mao, are you allowed to hire a day laborer because he needs money? So let's try and understand this. So Amalei Tanina, we learned in our Mishnah, you can buy something for the purpose of the seller because he doesn't have what to eat. So do we say what's that coming to include? Isn't that coming to include a day laborer? When we says he doesn't have what to eat, it's coming to include a day laborer. So Gemara says, no, Pirushi Kamifarish. No, it's explaining the seller, you're allowed to buy from him because he doesn't have what to eat. That's all we're explaining there. Eisvei, we challenge this. Abaye challenges this response of Rav to Rav Nachman because it says, Ein kosvin shtar yachov b'moed. You're not allowed to write like a promissory note on Chol Moed. But if you don't believe that the person's going to pay you back, or let's say the scribe doesn't have what to eat, you're allowed to write it. You're allowed to write it on Chol Moed. So when it says when it says he doesn't have what to eat, what's it coming to include? When he says he doesn't have what to eat, what's that coming to include? So isn't that coming to include my love? Isn't that coming to include isn't it coming to include schar pu'ula, a wage for a laborer? Isn't that coming to include a person who's a day laborer? Isn't that what it's coming to include? Shma mina. So we see from here that you can hire a scribe because he doesn't have what to eat. So that's the same idea that if you're a day laborer and you need food, you can hire him for work on Chol Moed. So that was what Abaye said. So Abaye is challenged by Rav Sheshes, and most of Rav Sheshes challenged Abaye because it says in the Mesechas Pesachim, it says Chachamim Omer Mishalosh Umnios, the three types of craftsmen. Osim Malacha B'Arvei Pesachim. They're allowed to do their work on Erev Yantif Ad Chatzos until noon. They can do their work. And who are these three types? Only three types of craftsmen are allowed to do their work: a tailor, a barber, and a laundryman. Now, a chayatim, why can the tailor do it? Because even a Chol Moed, you could sew if you're an amateur. So therefore, in the morning, we're going to allow the professional to do it. The morning of Erev Yantif. And why can the barber and the laundryman do it? Because we say if, let's say, somebody comes from overseas, or you got out of prison, you're allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed if you get out of prison. Why can't you get the haircut in prison? Because Tosfos tells us when you're in prison, you're not thinking of a haircut. You just don't think of yourself. You're locked up. You're locked up. You're not psychologically ready. You're not psychologically ready to get the haircut.
Yeah,
So,
Yosef also.
Yeah, Yosef had to get. Rav Meir is right. Yosef was brought out of prison. They gave him a haircut. First thing he did was get a haircut. So, so those people can also get a haircut on Chol Moed because they were released from prison or they came from overseas. Says Rav Sheishis Tabai. If you're going to say if you're going to say a day laborer doesn't have what to eat, can be hired on Chol Moed. Then everybody should be allowed, because if the day laborer could work on Chol Moed, then everybody should be allowed to work on Erev Yontif. By that logic, and so too, Rav Papa comes along and asks a similar question. Rav Papa says, all buildings should be permitted on Erev Pesach. Shekain Kosel Agor Shusaram, so Buna Kedarko. Because we're going to say that, because we say that if a wall is about to fall, you're allowed to rebuild it because of the danger. And so too, since once you're allowing one thing, you should allow that on our Pesach also. And Maskav Ravina Almeata, Ravina says, love Loristry, a scribe should be permitted. Because we know that a scribe is allowed to write if it's a really basically an emergency. He can write for women to get married, a kedushin. He can write the gittin. He could the divorce. He can write a receipt. So we see that under certain circumstances you can write it if you're a scribe. So if that's the logic, you should be allowed to write on Erev Pesach also. El Ravashi, so Ravashi says no. There's a big distinction. This is defending Abai. He says there's a big distinction between Erev Pesach and between Chol Moed. Moed, Arbasar Karamis, don't ask me a question from Chol Moed to Erev Pesach. Moed Mishum Tircho. Moed is the reason is why you can't do certain things is because of Tircha, because you're going to be doing too much work, and so therefore we don't allow it. Ubamakum Seder Sharabanim, where you're going to lose money, it's allowed. But our boss are mishum tzarach yom tofu. So, but on Erev Pesach, the only thing that we're allowing is if you need it for yontif itself. And so, if it's something that you need for yontif, like the barber, the laundryman, or the tailor, then we're going to allow it. If it's something that you need for the yontif, we're going to allow it. If it's something that we don't allow for the yontif, we're not going to allow it. And so that's the distinction between the cases. You need to be allowed to do it for Chol on Erev Pesach because it's for the purpose of the Yom Tov. For Chol Moed, we allow the work only if you're concerned of a loss of money, but otherwise, because if it's too much work, we're not going to allow you to do on Chol Moed. So now says the Mishnah. We're up to the next Mishnah. You're not allowed to do too much work on Chol Moed. You're not allowed to work too hard. So you're not supposed to take stuff from one house to another house. If it's over a shlap, it's a distance, you're not supposed to do it. But you are allowed to clean out your courtyard. You're allowed to take it to your courtyard. You're allowed to take it from your house to the courtyard. And you're not allowed to take your utensils from the house of a craftsman, take it back to your home. So you would drop something off at the craftsman to fix. You gave him your table to fix. You can't take it home on Chol Moed. If you're worried, what does it mean? Rashi says if you're worried that he's going to say you didn't pay him, and now he's going to charge you twice, you're a dishonest guy, then you could take it from his home, from the craftsman's home, and put it to another home. So Gemara says, let's analyze this. First of all, as you said, first you said you can't move it at all. And now you're saying you can move it into your courtyard. So Amar Abaye, I explained safe also. So now we say you have a house in your courtyard, then you can take it from your house into the courtyard, from your house into the house in your courtyard. You can move it right there, right, to the storage place. You can't bring if you had a utensil that you had given to the craftsman, you can't bring it home. So Amar Rav Papa says, Rava challenged us. He tested us. Can you imagine? You're a student of Rava, and he says, I'm going to give you a bechina. I'm going to give you an exam. Wow. Be shaking in my boots. So he says, Rav Papa says, Rava checked us. He says, Tanan, we learned Emavi and Kelmi Besa Uman. We said in our Mishnah, you can't bring a piece of a craftsmanship home from the craftsman's home. There are minu, but we have a contradictory Mishnah, Mesachas Psachim, which says, Morichin Muivim Kelmi Besa Uman. Where in Mishnah Mesachas Psachim, it says, you're allowed to bring to the craftsman and you're allowed to bring him home the work from the craftsman. And you could do it even though it's not for the purpose of the holiday. So how do we draw the distinction between the two cases? Why in our Mishnah that say you can't bring anything home from the craftsman, and the Mishnah Psachim says you can? So Rav Papa said, well, when Rav asked this question, we responded, okay. Our Mishnah is talking about Chol Moed. The Mishnah Psachim is talking about an Erev Pesach. An Erev Pesach you could bring it home, and Chol Moed you can't. That's one answer. Kam bar basar, kam achon shamon. Second answer says Rav Papa. Then we got a little cute. We tried to give Rav a second answer. And what's the second answer? You could even say the Mishnah Psachim, which says you can bring it home. It's also on Chol Moed. Our Mishnah here says you can't. Yeah, kam mamino, kam shein mamino. It depends whether or not you believe the craftsman. If you don't trust him, take it home. Like in Psachim, we don't trust the guy. He says he's going to charge us twice. But here in Moed Katan, we do trust him. So then you can't bring it home. So we're on Tanya, and we're on the top of 13b. We even have a brisa to support this concept. What's the brisa to support it? It says, "Mevin kelam mibeisa uman." You can bring furniture home from the craftsman. Can go and kan mibase hakadar, like a jug. Or kosmin based on zagag, if you have glass cup from the glass maker. Avot semer based on tzaba, v'lokelim based on uman. But you can't bring home the wool from the dyer or the utensils from the craftsman. If he doesn't have what to eat, you could pay him, and so he could have the money to eat. But if he doesn't believe him, if you don't believe the craftsman, then put the stuff in the house next to him. And if you're worried, they might come to steal it, then you can bring it discreetly to your home. So we see from this source, it says if he doesn't believe him, then you can bring it home. You can bring it home. So we see from here, this is like the answer that Rav Papa said, that if you believe him, you can't touch it. If you don't believe him, you can bring it home. So Rava said, no, the second answer I'm not going to accept from you. Why? Because Rava says, Teras Mevin Moichin Kasha. But he says, you answered the Mishnah Psachim with respect to bringing it home. There it says, okay, you can bring it home if you don't believe him. But why? The Mishnah Psachim also said you could bring it to the craftsman. The Katani Mavin, so you would also say you could bring it to the craftsman. Well, what does that have to do with whether or not you believe him? If you don't believe him, why would you bring it to him? You can't bring it to him on Erev Pesach. So therefore, the Katani Mavin, our Mishnah says you can't bring it home. For Kol Shekain Shein Molichem, for sure you can't bring it to him. So it's a question. Why does the Mishnah Psachim say you can bring it? So therefore, I don't accept your second answer, says Rav Papa. El Machavarta Kedeshanya Mekar. The correct answer was the first one. Our Mishnah is talking about Chol Moed, you can't bring it home, and the Mishnah in Psachim is talking about Erev Pesach, there you can bring it home. So now we're up to the last Mishnah of the second chapter. The Mishnah says, you're allowed to cover up the dried figs. Bikash. They used to dry out their figs so that they become nice and dry and edible. So, but during that time, if they got wet, they'd be ruined. So you could cover with straw. Rabbi Yehuda says, af ma'avin. He says you could cover with ma'avin. We'll see what ma'avin is. Then the Mishnah says, Milchre Peros Ksus, the Kalim, the people who sell their fruit, their clothing, their utensils, Milchre Bitsina, you could sell it in the marketplace, but you have to do it discreetly with Tzorach HaMoed, because you could only sell it for the purpose of the holiday, but you have to do it discreetly. Not Sayyadin, not the Shashos, not Grosos. These are the trappers, the hunters, the people who crush up the grain or the beans. They could do this discreetly for the festival. Rabbi Yossi Omer Heimach Niras. When Rabbi Yossi says this phrase, which the Gemara is going to have to discuss, it says they were strict upon themselves. What does this mean? Zakta Gemara, Pligi Bar Rabbi Chia Bar Abba Rabbi Yasi, which made the Chizki and Rabbi Yochanan. So what does it mean? Chadam or Mechapim, when it says that you could cover over the figs, Akurushe. That means sparsely. Uma'avin asmuche. And ma'avin means thick, a thick covering. V'chadam or Mechapim ben Akurushe asmuche. And Mechapim means to cover it thin or thickly. And ma'avin means osin or sokum kri. That first you pile up the figs, so the figs are covering the figs beneath it, and then you cover it up. Then you cover it up after an extra step. The extra step. Said Tayana mi'achim ma'avin also sokum kri. Rabbi Yehuda says that ma'avin means you make it like a bundle with the figs on top. Mochri peiro is ksus ukelim. Mochri mitzina. If you're selling the fruit, clothing. You sell it discreetly. When Rabbi Yossi says that he says that people who sell it have to sell it discreetly. He says they were strict upon themselves. What does that mean? Is he being lenient or strict? Is Rabbi Yossi being lenient or strict? Is he saying meaning to say that they don't have to do it at all, that they could sell it that they shouldn't sell it at all, or maybe so therefore. That's what he's being, that they were restricted, they wouldn't sell it at all, or maybe he was being lenient. Odilma, maybe Rabbi Yossi is being lenient. He said, what does it mean they were strict upon themselves? That they sold it discreetly was a strict thing, but really they didn't need to do that. So is he being lenient and says you don't need to sell it discreetly, or is he being strict and says no, that they were completely strict and they didn't sell it at all? So the Gemara says, let's try and give an answer. Tashma mochri peres ksus kelim mochri mitzino aterach hamoli. You sell it discreetly for the festival. Rabbi Yossi says, Tagre Tveria hein. Echmiro atzman shoyom mochri kolikar. He says, Rabbi Yossi says, no, the merchants of Tiberias didn't sell it at all. So therefore, we see that Rabbi Yossi was being strict. It says that they were being strict. They didn't sell it at all. Similarly, we have another case where we said, the people who trapped the animals, they trapped it discreetly for the festival. Rabbi Yossi says, he says the people of Akko, they didn't sell it at all. Again, he was strict. The people who cut up we'll see what these are in a moment. These are different. This is wheat that they would cut up. So those people, they could cut up privately for the festival. Rabbi Yossi says, he says that they didn't cut it at all in Sipori. And now, so we see from here, so we see from here that Rabbi Yossi says that they were strict and they didn't do it at all. Says Abaye, what is chilka? Which is what they said that the Dushe cut it up into chilka on Chol Moed. What does that mean? So he says, you take the wheat kernel and you cut it into two. You split it. And Targis is chado atlas, and Targis is 1 into 3, and Tisni is chado arba, it's 1 into 4. He also Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi showed up, he said kunta. He said, no, what is chilki? Chilki is spelt. It's not that you cut the kernel into 2, it's that it's just spelt, and that's what they were talking about. So Meisvei, but we have a contradiction to Rav Dimi, because it says chilka targis for Tisni, tamei makol makom, that the targi and the Tisni and the chilka are always tamei. Now, in order for food to become tamei, a fresh produce, it needs to first have water on it. So if you're going to say that this is so we see from here, this kosher. If you're going to say that it's cut into 2 or 3 or 4, well, then why we say it could always become tamei? Before you cut it, you had to soak it. According to Rav Dimi, who says it's spelt amai tamei, and why is it tamei? Why is it always tamei? How always kosher? So it didn't have the water on it, so it was never what we call chuksha kabel tuma. There are 7 liquids, and the mnemonic to remember it is yad shechatam. That if they need to go on these food items in order for the food items to be capable of becoming tamei. So Rav Dimi would say the mekalfa. No, it's where the spelt was peeled. Because if you wouldn't soak it in water, we'll have a mekalfa. You wouldn't be able to peel it. So the Gemara says, so why is it called, according to Rav Dimi, why is it spelled called cholka? To shakel cholkayo, because you've removed the shell. Excuse me. Meisivei, another question on Rav Dimi. Because we said, I know them and and let's say a person takes a vow that they're not going to eat any grain. Also, you're not allowed to eat dried up beans because that's like considered a grain. But you can eat the beans when they're moist. You can eat the rice. And you're allowed to eat the rice. So you're allowed to eat the rice under those circumstances. So you're allowed to eat the rice, and you're also allowed to eat chilka targis v'tisni, which is, now this makes sense. Bishlam Aman Amar Chadal Tarti makes sense according to how he suggested that Abaye said that the chilka is where you divide the grain into two, the v'chadal atlas, or to three, v'chadal arba, or to four. Shapir makes sense why we draw a distinction when say it's no longer grain. We understand. Nafka umi Torah Duggan, by splitting the grain kernels, it's no longer going to be considered the grain because the grain is refers to something that you pile up. Or presumably you could grind it into the flour. But according to the one who says that it's spelled Dagam Alyahu, this is real grain. Why would you be allowed to eat the grain? So kosher. Indeed, this is a difficulty on Rav Dimi. So says the Gemara, Rav Huna Sharlu Lahanu Kupiyaisa. Rav Huna allowed these people who sold spices, Lamezel is a Bune Kir Chaya B'Shukra. He allowed them to sell it in the normal, typical manner in the marketplace on Chol Moed. He allowed it to sell the spices. So I say Rav Kahuna, but Rav Kahuna challenged them. We said in the Brisa, Chanos Pesucho Estav Posech and Al Kadarko, that if you have a shop that opens up into the side streets, then you could sell in the typical manner of Chol Moed. Pesucho Rishus Arabim, but if it opens up into the public domain, Posech Achas V'no Achas, that you could, then you have to sell it discreetly, so only open up one door if it opens up into the market. So those shops used to have two doors. So then if it on Chol Moed, if it opens up into the marketplace, you have to sell it discreetly. So how could he be selling the spices in this normal manner? And also said in this source, Erev Yom Tov Achron Shalchag, Motu Mater Shuka Yer B'Peres B'Shvil Kvod Yom Tov. Ha'achron, and then this is the real question. On the last day of the festival but we're talking about Chol Moed, they would open up the whole marketplace and sell all the fruit, so everybody could. So the fruits would be the markets would be like the shuk in Jerusalem. It'd be beautifully filled, so people could go and buy their fruits and bring it home for Yontif, which implies that you're only allowed to sell the fruits in this manner on the last day of the festival, not the whole Chol Moed. So how could Rav Huna allow them to sell the spices in the normal manner? We see it's only allowed on the last day of Chol Moed. Gemara says, it depends. In those days, the fruits they could hang around and last after the festival, especially if they were the dried out fruits. And so therefore we're not concerned that so therefore we're not going to allow you to sell them on Yontif except for the last day. We're not going to allow you to sell them on Chol Moed because we don't want people to stockpile them. And so therefore they said sell them. If you need to buy it for a Yontif, then buy it discreetly. But spices, tavlin here doesn't mean like a spice like salt and pepper. The Rashi says here, kru v'karshinan. So it's like basically like cabbage and those types of vegetables and the leeks, or Cretan. It's so these types of vegetables in those days they didn't last. So therefore, you could sell them in the normal manner. We were not worried if you buy them a Chol Moed, you're going to be saving them for after the Yontif. So that's the distinction. We've now completed the second chapter, but we will return to your second chapter, God willing, the same way we learned this second chapter of Moed Katan today. God willing, in 7.5 years, we'll be learning it with the Mashiach, our group with the Mashiach. The Mashiach will come and visit us, and we'll learn it together with the Mashiach. Amen. So we'll start. If anybody